What if humans never needed sleep? What if sleep was never necessary? What if, from the very beginning of human history, the body had never demanded rest, and the mind had never required unconsciousness to survive? Imagine a world where night exists, but no one truly enters it, where darkness falls, yet awareness remains unbroken, where beds are cultural artifacts, not biological necessities, and where the act of closing one's eyes is no longer a surrender, but a choice. At first glance, the idea feels like progress. After all, sleep consumes nearly a third of a human life. Decades spent unconscious. Entire years lost to silence and dreams that vanish by morning. If sleep were no longer required, life would instantly expand. Time, that most precious resource, would finally seem abundant. But abundance has consequences. Without sleep, the boundary between day and night dissolves. Cities no longer dim their lights. Streets remain alive at hours once reserved for silence. Factories never pause. Offices never fully close. The concept of after hours quietly disappears. Productivity becomes constant, and with it, expectation. In a world without sleep, rest is no longer universal. And when rest is no longer universal, it is no longer protected. The moment some humans can remain awake indefinitely, the question arises, why shouldn't everyone? The pressure begins subtly. At first, it is praised as dedication. Then it becomes normal, and eventually it becomes required. Time off no longer feels justified when time itself is no longer limited by exhaustion. Employers begin to measure commitment not by quality of thought, but by continuity of presence. The line between effort and existence fades. When no one needs to sleep, stopping becomes suspicious. But the most profound change is not economic. It is psychological. Sleep has always been humanity's great equalizer. No matter how powerful, wealthy, intelligent, or ambitious a person may be, sleep humbles them. It pulls them away from control. It reminds them that they are biological, not mechanical. Remove sleep, and you remove surrender. Without sleep, the mind never fully disconnects. There is no daily reset, no enforced pause in thought, no darkness in which worries dissolve and return smaller by morning. Memory accumulates without interruption. Emotion lingers longer than it should. Regret no longer fades overnight. The human mind, evolved to process life in cycles of consciousness and unconsciousness, begins to stretch beyond its design. Thoughts do not end, they stack. Experiences do not settle, they remain active. The silence once provided by sleep is gone, and silence, it turns out, was never empty. It was healing. In this sleepless world, dreams disappear, not slowly, but entirely. There is no space for them, no threshold between reality and imagination where the mind could wander freely. Creativity, once born in the half-light between and sleep struggles to find its origin. Art changes, stories become more literal, music becomes more structured. Imagination, deprived of its nightly chaos, becomes orderly and less surprising. The mind, always awake, becomes efficient, but less playful. And yet, people still close their eyes, not because they must, but because they remember something has been lost. They sit in dark rooms, unmoving, attempting to recreate rest without sleep. They meditate. They stare at walls. They seek artificial pauses in a world that no longer forces them, because consciousness without interruption is not enlightenment. It is fatigue without relief. Relationships, too, begin to change. Sleep was once shared vulnerability. Two people surrendering control together, lying still, defenseless, trusting the world to continue without them. Without sleep, intimacy loses a dimension. There are no shared mornings where faces are unguarded. No late-night confessions whispered in exhaustion. No sense of we survived today, now we rest. Life becomes a continuous stream rather than a sequence of chapters. And stories need chapters. Without sleep, aging feels different. Time passes, but without daily endings, it becomes harder to mark progress. Days blur into one another. Milestones feel less significant when nothing ever truly pauses. Birthdays feel symbolic rather than earned. Even grief changes. Sleep once allowed sorrow to soften slowly, night by night. In its absence, pain remains sharp, persistent, uninterrupted. Mourning becomes a constant state rather than a process. The sleepless world becomes a world that remembers too well. And then there is the question of meaning. Sleep was never wasted time. It was a reminder that life was not meant to be fully controlled. That part of existence required letting go, trusting biology, accepting limits. Without sleep, humans gain time, but lose rhythm. They become awake, but not necessarily alive, because life is not defined by how long consciousness lasts, but by how it moves, by tension and release, by effort and rest, by light and darkness. A world without sleep is a world without natural endings, and without endings, beginnings lose their power. So perhaps sleep was never a flaw in human design. Perhaps it was a boundary placed there for a reason, a daily reminder that to live fully, one must sometimes disappear, close the eyes, and allow the world to carry on without you.